Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, inflation devastating the country and Americans' pocketbooks.
The increase in prices getting worse.
I feel the inflation pain every day. Every day, everything is going up and up.
And now growing concerns we may already be in a recession. The president in Israel promising there will be no nuclear Iran. What's next in America after Roe versus Wade has been overturned? One key battle over the crisis pregnancy centers.
We're already seeing state and private entities like the embattled pregnancy care centers step up to surround expecting moms with a caring community.
Also, what did the Pope say about President Biden's position on abortion? And how you can live longer and healthier, and one step to take to be aware of the hidden dangers in our own foods.
It's probably the biggest health problem that people are unaware of.
All those stories and more today on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
I want to begin with the exploding inflation rate, now at 9.1%, the highest since the late 1980s, 1981, and squeezing consumers from the gas pump to the grocery store. That has the Federal Reserve considering even more aggressive hikes in interest rates, even at the risk of causing a recession. Our George Thomas is on this story.
Atlanta's Fed chairman told reporters everything's in play, including raising interest rates by as much as a full point at its next meeting this month. If the central bank does take that aggressive step, it would be the first time they've done so in decades. From food to gas to rent, Americans are feeling the pinch in their wallets as prices for practically everything continues to skyrocket by the day.
Gas is just outrageous these days. Very, very much. I go to the supermarket, everything is expensive.
June's inflation report shows prices are a whopping 9.1% higher today compared to the same time last year. That's the highest inflation rate increase in more than 40 years.
I feel the inflation pain every day. Every day, everything is going up and up.
Gas prices up nearly 60% since last year.
I usually spend about $100 a month in gas, and now I'm spending like $240, $250.
And at the grocery store, food prices up almost 11% compared to last year.
I notice like I go and try to get milk, and like even a half gallon of milk, it's hard to find for under $8.
E.J. Anthony with the Heritage Foundation telling CBN's Faith Nation that in his mind, these rising inflation numbers point to one thing.
We've already had one quarter of negative economic growth. Last quarter, the second quarter of this year, is most likely going to turn negative as well. So yes, we are most likely already in a recession.
The Biden administration, under pressure to find a solution, is pushing back on this month's June inflation report, claiming they are backward-looking, since it doesn't take into account the drop in gas prices.
June CPI data is already out of date because energy prices have come down substantially this month and are expected to fall further.
Investors are betting the Federal Reserve will respond aggressively to these red-hot inflation numbers when it meets in 2 weeks. Some economists worry that pushing those rates too high, too fast, and for a long period will put more headwinds in the economy. But Anthony says it's the only solution.
Inflation is going to cause a recession anyway. We might as well get it over with and bring prices down in the process.
George Thomas, CBN News.
Turning overseas now to Israel, where President Biden met with acting Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid, and Iran's nuclear program was the central issue. The meeting resulted in what they call the Jerusalem Declaration, a strategic partnership between the two countries. The declaration is seen as the centerpiece of the president's visit. It talks about preventing Iran from becoming a nuclear power, and the president did tell Israeli TV he would use force against Iran to stop it from getting a nuclear weapon if that was the last resort. Still, critics question whether the Biden administration has been strong enough in its dealings with Iran. Back here at home, pro-abortion politicians are coming after pregnancy centers by urging Google to eliminate access to them during searches on Google Maps. That move coming as Congress is looking into the impact of the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade. The House Oversight Committee calling on state officials, abortion advocates, and legal experts to examine the effects of the new abortion restrictions in nearly half of the country. This comes as lawmakers battle over what action needs to be taken at the federal level. As Caitlin Burke reports now from Washington, party lines were clearly drawn during Tuesday's hearing.
They don't appear to have much voice in the Republican caucus today, but there are lots of Republicans who agree with us that this is a choice that belongs to women, girls, and their families.
Their whole focus is on intimidating the court, and they're the ones with the radical position. Mr. Raskin just said we're radical. They're the ones who think you should take the life of an unborn child. You could take the life of an unborn child right up until their birthday.
As lawmakers volleyed back and forth, witnesses spoke of their fears moving forward in a post-Roe America.
And it's opening up a range of unprecedented legal issues that I never thought we would be dealing with. Whether or not you can travel and leave your state, whether or not you can be surveilled, whether or not you as an individual are truly free in this country.
It is essentially a death sentence, given the data that we already know, that a woman is 14 times more likely to die by carrying a pregnancy to term than having an abortion.
Erin Hawley, an attorney at Alliance Defending Freedom and the sole pro-life witness, said her view of a post-Roe America is a hopeful one.
We're already seeing state and private entities like the embattled pregnancy care centers step up to surround expecting moms with a caring community.
She sought to set the record straight on the intentions behind the law that set precedent for 50 years.
The truth is that Roe was not the pro-woman opinion that some imagine. In a patriarchal passage that the pro-abortion left would rather forget, Roe gave to a woman's doctor the ability to choose an abortion.
Witnesses also debating whether or not abortion should be considered health care.
Abortion absolutely is health care. When you have a miscarriage or an ectopic pregnancies, a lot of times abortion is the way that these things are resolved.
So I think there's a few things on which we need to set the record straight. One, that an ectopic pregnancy, treatment for that condition never involves an abortion. The same is true of a miscarriage. An abortion is a situation in which a child, as the Supreme Court explained in Dobbs, is purposely put to death.
Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
That hearing being held Wednesday, and the battle over the issue is far from settled. The Pope has now weighed in on President Biden's position on abortion, calling it inconsistent. In an interview with Univision and Televisa, the Pope was asked about whether communion should be offered to politicians who support abortion. The Pope pointed out scientific evidence shows DNA is already present within a month of conception. ACI Prensa reports as the president's defense of abortion. The Pope said that Biden should, quote, talk to his pastor about that inconsistency. Coming up, the devastating impact of Europe's climate change regulations, why some farmers in the Netherlands say they could be put out of business, and how those European Union rules could mean burnouts and shortages of food and home heating oil. We're going to have that story for you when we come back. Farmers in the Netherlands are fighting for their lives over government climate control mandates, and it appears there is no end in sight to their protest. Dutch officials insisting on abiding by European rules, while the farmers say the restrictions on the use of nitrogen will put them out of business. Appearing on this week's episode of The Global Lane, the former U.S. ambassador to the Netherlands says the EU mandates could lead to brownouts and home heating oil and food shortages.
Roughly 30 to 50% of the farmers may actually lose their farms. They will lose the freedom to farm. They'll have to go find another occupation.
And that will, of course, cause food shortages, right?
Well, the Dutch are phenomenal exporters of food. They're the second, third, fourth largest exporter of food globally. This is a country of 17 million people. The Dutch will not experience food shortages. But there may be other parts of the world that will, because, this food is going to go away. And these are restrictions that are being put in not necessarily by the Dutch government, but are being imposed on the Dutch by Brussels, by the European Union.
Well, how can the Netherlands and the European Union then back off from these climate change regulations without violating the Paris Treaty on Climate Change? Can they do that?
Well, they're already starting to violate the Paris Climate Agreement. They became dependent on Russia for their natural gas and fuels. And I think the Germans have just recently announced that they're going to be reopening some of their coal plants. And so they recognize that the goals that in the Paris Climate Agreement are unrealistic, are driving up the cost to their consumers, and going to put them in a position where they're going to have brownouts now, or this fall and winter, there's a real possibility that they're not going to have enough energy to heat their homes. It's going to be a real crisis in Europe.
Well, and the food shortages, I guess there are already some grocery store shelves in the Netherlands that are empty. So is there a compromise solution? What should be done then to satisfy the farmers, but also those pushing climate restrictions? Anything?
Well, the food shortages in the grocery stores right now are because the tractors and the truckers, they're going up to the distribution centers and they're blocking the delivery trucks from making the deliveries. The Dutch always talk about the polder model, where they come together and they reach a consensus. I'm not sure where this one's going to end up. I think the government is pretty much locked in their position that says, we're going to impose these restrictions. The farmers are saying, we want the freedom to farm. I don't know what the resolution is going to be.
It doesn't seem like they're compatible. Those are two opposing
They're
views.
not.
Yeah. So shifting gears here, President Biden, he says the purpose of his Saudi Arabia trip is to advance a peace deal between the Saudis and the Israelis. And his critics say he's only visiting there to beg the Saudis to step up oil exports to reduce the pain of the pump for Americans. Of course, Biden blames Vladimir Putin's war with Ukraine for the higher prices here. Your thoughts?
Well, Gary, the president clearly, when he took office, indicated that he was going to declare war on fossil fuels. He's been successful. In Michigan, we're paying $4.79 per gallon for gas, significantly higher than what we were paying before, more than $2 before. His number one focus and priority, as he has stated, is to fix inflation, address this problem for the American consumer. So clearly, his focus in Saudi Arabia is going to be to try to get the Saudis to pump more oil. I hope that he's successful in fostering a peace agreement between the Saudis and the Israelis. A number of countries did this with the Abraham Accords. Let's build off of that. This may be the one policy that the Biden administration has embraced from President Trump. It fundamentally changed the Middle East, and let's build on that, and let's go after and limit the potential of Iran, and let's limit their influence in the region.
Well, let's talk about that a little more. So what would a Saudi-Israeli peace deal mean for the Middle East, especially those efforts to counter Iran?
Well, what it would mean is that we now have 5, 6, 7 countries that would start coming together and recognizing the state of Israel. They would start doing economic business, trade, and engagement with Israel. And you would also then see them come together, hopefully politically, on national security issues, because they have one thing in common. The UAE, Saudi, the Israelis, they all feel threatened by Iran. And hopefully what the result will be is that they will isolate Iran in the region.
Also on tonight's episode of The Global Lane, you're going to hear more from Peter Hoekstra. The former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee says China may have intentionally unleashed the COVID-19 virus on the United States. And a look at government complicity in violence against pro-life pregnancy centers. You can catch those stories and more on The Global Lane. It begins at 8:30 Eastern. You can find it on the CBN News channel or on the CBN News app. Still ahead, we're going to take a look at ways you can live a longer and healthier life, including avoiding certain foods. We're going to have that story for you. We come back right after this. A new government study has found that controversial chemical called glyphosate, widely used in herbicides, is also being widely found in people here in the United States in more than 80% of urine samples in adults and children. That chemical is one reason to avoid processed foods, which can be bad for your gut, because one of the ways to stay healthy is a healthy gut. It can help to fight off disease. CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson brings us the story.
Studies from the United Nations predict the world will have more than 3 million people age 100 or older in just 30 years. That's good news, unless many of that population suffer from declining health.
We base a lot of our behaviors thinking that this is what's going to happen to us. But in fact, that doesn't have to happen.
Expert on aging, Dr. Stephen Gundry knows what it takes to live a vibrant, disease-free life well into old age.
What we know about super old people who are thriving is that they don't become infirm, that they don't get cancer, that they don't get Alzheimer's. These people actually have the physiology, have the workings of a 50-year-old individual.
In his book, The Longevity Paradox, How to Die Young at a Ripe Old Age, Dr. Gundry zeroes in on the things that set healthy centenarians apart from their sicker counterparts. Topping the list, plenty of good bacteria in their intestines.
It's amazing. Again, when we look at 105-year-old people around the world, they carry the diverse gut microbiome of 30-year-old people.
Having enough of the right bacteria can prevent just about every type of disease, including inherited ones.
Whether we turn genes on or off with information, and that's called epigenetics or epigenomics, and it's that interplay with actually a lot of the material that comes from our microbiome telling our genes what to do.
Dr. Gundry says the key is avoiding processed foods because of the chemical ingredients, especially the pesticide glyphosate.
It's probably the biggest health problem that people are unaware of. It's in all of our products, all of our cereals, all of our breads, all of our crackers. A recent study of 35 oat products in the United States found glyphosate, including some very dangerous levels, in every one of the oat products, including many of our kids' cereals, including our granola.
Gundry says glyphosate can wipe out good bacteria and even cause a leaky gut.
You will actually make perforations in the wall of your gut, and bacterial particles and plant compounds and toxins will get right through the wall of your gut.
This can lead to migraines, chronic fatigue, and autoimmune diseases like celiac. In addition to eating right, robust old-timers also go without food altogether for long periods of time. Fasting a minimum of 12 hours a day can trigger the body to eliminate whatever hinders survival.
And so fasting, or intermittent fasting, gives us an opportunity to really get all the best cells all the time. And that's what we all want.
Another common characteristic of healthy centenarians is they take few drugs or none at all. While many people, such as diabetics, take specific medication, Gundry maintains healthier choices can even reverse that need.
I have yet to meet a type 2 diabetic who I can't get off of all medications by teaching them how to eat. I haven't met a person who takes a statin drug to lower cholesterol that I can't get off a statin once I teach them how to eat.
Dr. Gundry adds antibiotics and common painkillers can harm the gut microbiome, with even something like an antacid leading to other problems.
And so I see so many people with dementia and congestive heart failure who've been taking these drugs chronically.
Finally, exercise helps keep bodies working no matter how old a person is. It improves blood flow, particularly to the brain. Women who exercise routinely during their lifespan have a 90% reduction in Alzheimer's compared to women who don't. Muscles strengthen bones, preventing injury. Turns out walking against gravity, whether up or down, is especially good exercise because it works this area of the body, which contains most of our muscle mass. In fact, the 5 cities worldwide with the highest concentration of healthy centenarians are all very hilly. Those cities are in what's known as blue zones. The only one in America is Loma Linda, which means beautiful hill. This California city is not only home to the largest concentration of centenarians in the U.S., but also the largest concentration of Seventh-day Adventists. That denomination avoids processed food and drugs while embracing fasting and exercise. Years ago, Dr. Gundry practiced heart surgery in Loma Linda and was so inspired by the people here that he shifted his focus to teaching the rest of the world how to live strong to a ripe old age. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
We're back with an encouraging word for your day today. Time now for your Thursday Thankful, and I pray that you will join me in this prayer of gratitude. God, I thank you for even the toughest of times. I don't like them, and they don't feel good, but they are still for my good, and my good is for your glory. With that prayer of gratitude, I encourage you to make this Thursday one that is filled with thankfulness. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. I remind you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News channel at any time. You can also find them online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today or any day. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We would love to hear from you. Make this a thankful Thursday and join us right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.